Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. But I kind of think about this piece of advice I've heard that's have a bias toward yes. So, you'll miss out on like a lot of really cool experiences if you're always thinking, oh, I could never do that. And seeing these racers complete the race and seeing their grit and determination was really inspiring. And I'm not saying that I'll be out there at the next race, but I do think that just seeing that this is this really cool opportunity that we got to learn about. And I think just being open-minded to new challenges and new experiences is so important. And that's something that I took away.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
Welcome to episode 127 of the Dark Zone, an Adventure Racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Today's episode highlights a creative crossover between the college classroom and adventure racing. Students from Washington and Lee University's leading public relations campaigns course partner with Adventure Addicts Racing to support the Adrenaline Rush Adventure Race, designing and executing real-world media strategies for a live event. Along the way, they learned about telling the story of a race, engaging the audience, and the spirit of adventure racing. And they also came away with thoughtful insights and some pointed advice for race directors looking to grow and elevate the sport. It's PR meets AR, and the results are worth a listen. Thanks for being here.
Hello, this is Frank Johnson, and I'm thrilled to announce that adventure racing is coming back to Iowa. The Wild Driftless Adventure Race will be October 4th in the Driftless region of northeastern Iowa, featuring two options, the 9-hour Wild Driftless and the 4-hour Wild Driftless Light. Come and explore the region's rugged beauty and let us help you shed that image of Iowa you have in your head. Gone are most of the cornfields. Instead, you'll be greeted by sheer rock faces, hardwood forests, and crystal clear trout streams. We have fun single-track mountain biking, those famous Iowa gravel roads, Riffley River paddling, and fantastic forest trekking on a course designed to challenge avid racers while also serving as the perfect entry event into the sport. This is an adventurer's adventure race, and we hope to see you there, October 4th, hosted at Camp Iwalu in Strawberry Point, Iowa. Wild Driftless is a proud member of the Wisconsin Adventure Racing Series. Learn more at www.wilddriftless.com.
Imagine a world where young women in Afghanistan and Pakistan rise above societal constraints, embracing their strength and potential. Ascend Athletics is making this vision a reality. Through mountaineering-based leadership training, Ascend empowers girls and women aged 15 to 24 to become courageous leaders in their communities. By conquering physical summits, these young women build self-esteem and develop skills that last a lifetime. Operating since 2015 in Afghanistan, expanding to Pakistan in 2023, Ascend focuses on regions where gender inequality is most pronounced, providing tools for girls and women to lead empowered lives. Join the Dark Zone in supporting these brave young women as they climb towards a brighter future. Visit ascendathletics.org to learn more about and contribute to this transformative mission. And remember, Ascend pays nothing for the spot. We love the work that they do, and the Dark Zone is happy to support it. Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. So we're setting a new record with this podcast. I have 7 people on the podcast today. New record for the Dark Zone. Great reason to be here. By virtue of where the Zoom box placed her, Quinn gets to have the first question. Quinn, what was the assignment and what did you do for Adventure Addicts Racing?
Yeah, so our course, Leading PR Campaigns, was led by Professor Jared McCary. We were tasked with making a social media campaign for our client, Adventure Addicts Racing, leading up to their 2025 Adrenaline Rush race. Something that I also would just like to add is this is the first time that Professor McCary has ever taught this course. It's going to become our capstone for our major. So it definitely was a lot of work. And basically in the beginning, we ran a lot of research. We ran a quantitative survey while also doing multiple qualitative interviews to understand the background of these people that are choosing to do these adventure races. And then after understanding the sport, we met with our client, Michelle Fauché, multiple times, who's the head of Adventure Addicts Racing. This was basically to just get an idea of how we should be promoting this sport, what social media platforms we should be going through, if we should be using the newsletter, the website, and so on and so forth. And so basically leading up to the race, we posted content on our Facebook, just continuously announcing that the Adrenaline Rush race was happening March 22nd, March 23rd. And then leading up to the week before the race, we were able to get content up. 3 members of our class were actually at the race filming content. And then 3 members were remote. We were helping just to make sure that everything was running smoothly on the back end. Where we're at today, we're actually in our evaluation phase. We have 2 more weeks of this phase where we're still posting content after the race from when we received that. And also evaluating how well our campaign did, and also doing things like this where we're able to give our personal feedback of people that hadn't been involved in adventure racing, but are still able to kind of give Michelle, but then also other racing directors a direction to go in.
So Veronica, coming over to you now. And by the way, you're all going to speak today, so you're not getting off the hook, so be ready. I'm assuming that none of you had done adventure racing before, and therefore one of your earliest tasks was to build your understanding of what adventure racing was and what it was not. Veronica, how did you go about doing that? How did you learn about the sport?
Yeah, as Quinn started to sharing with you, we conducted very in-depth research. Of course, some of it was secondary, so we were just looking at different adventure racing organizations, what is going on, what are the races. And we were very fortunate to have Professor McCary, who is an experienced racer. So he provided us with some initial insights and guided us through research phase. And then we also got to talk to different racers. So we scheduled interviews and conducted some primary research to understand what adventure racing is and what sentiment do people feel towards it. And after doing all of that, we built a survey that was sent out to racers across the country. And I'm pretty sure you filled it out as well. So you know what I'm talking about. And we got some more quantitative data from talking to racers, and then on top of it, sending them the survey.
So Francis, coming over to you now. So the survey results went out. You did this base of knowledge. What did you learn as a result of that early research? What were your takeaways about the sport and about the people that did it?
There were kind of 2 components. I would say we were learning a lot about how people feel about the sport, but also how they engage with social media and website for Adventure Addicts and for other similar organizations. So I think from the survey, we learned that people really like to engage with the websites. And for Adventure Addicts, at least the primary engagement was with the website. And then Facebook was like the secondary platform. And then we learned that people are most interested in like updates about upcoming races and blog posts. So that was definitely valuable for us as we entered the stage of creating our content. And then we also kind of learned that there are different levels of involvement, and everyone kind of makes the sport their own. So some people participate in just a couple of races and aren't as competitive about it. And it's more something they do for fun, whereas for some people it's highly competitive and can be very intense. And I think that was really helpful because at first, at least for me, when I learned about adventure racing, I thought it was just this one thing that was very high intensity. Only the strongest athletes and people who were willing to dedicate a significant amount of time every week to training for these races. But we learned that it can be different for everyone.
And so based on that, and having understood the fact that there's various levels of engagement with the sport and various levels of training is necessary, you built that base there, and you had a strong sense of who was going to be at the race, who was not going to be at the race. I think for the purpose of the audience, I think that the race directors who listen to the Dark Zone are interested in that feedback you had about websites, Facebook, blog posts, things like that. Ruby, coming over to you now. Now that you're on the back end of the event, you had a chance to be involved. What occurred there? Of those communication strategies, where do you think people who want to promote the sport should turn to first? What does your gut tell you about the best way to communicate with the community?
So, based on a lot of the survey results, we found that primarily the community engages with Facebook and websites. And this is for a variety of factors, but Facebook is really just the best place to get information out and to get people to engage with. And that's kind of what we identified, so that I specifically was not attending the race. So I did a lot of content creation with Quinn and Francis, and we really worked on targeting Facebook. So we would create graphics and post them on the Facebook, because we knew that that's where most of the racers or spectators, really anyone involved in the community, is going to go for their information. So to your question, I would say probably Facebook. Also prioritizing websites is important too. That's what we found.
So the interesting thing with Facebook is that it's, you in many ways, race directors are anybody for the most part who uses Facebook heavily is kind of held hostage to that platform, right? If you don't do it through Facebook, no one's really going to get it. And they had this experience last year at the USARA National Championships, and I was part of the media team there. They had built a specific website just for updates over the course of the race, right? This is where they were going to send people to go to the race. This was the location. And what we found very quickly early in the race was that nobody was engaging with the website. Everybody was doing it through via Facebook. That's where they wanted the updates and things like that. And so recognizing that Facebook is that primary platform, there's definitely an issue though, because there are people who may not want to use Facebook, right? Not everybody's on Facebook. It's not a huge part of that. Jared, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think, and Ruby, you can elaborate on this and other folks can elaborate on this, is we have Facebook over here, and the students were also thinking about Instagram as another platform. But Facebook was kind of motivated by not just what people said they were interested in using, it also related to some of their demographics. Now, could you folks elaborate a little bit on that, how you learned about the demographics of particularly the racer audience? And then how that related to that platform?
So for that question, I saw Claire. Well, I want to come to you next. You nodded your head a little bit too when that question was asked. So if you want to pick that up, Claire, please.
Yes, in our survey, we learned that the primary age demographic of adventure racers is usually around like late millennials or Gen X users. So usually that demographic uses Facebook as their primary platform. And, a Gen Z audience might be more inclined to use Instagram, but I think that based on the survey data, we found that Facebook is the most intuitive platform for that age demographic of who is going to be participating in adventure racing and seeing the content. But we also included some links to Instagram content as well. So what we posted on a Facebook, some of it ended up being posted on Adventure Addicts Instagram as well. To kind of attract maybe a younger audience, or if you're not primarily on Facebook, you could still see some of the content, but we focused primarily on Facebook due to that demographic data.
So if I understand correctly, you, based on who was going to be taking part in the race, you recognize the fact that people who are older, Gen X, welcome to the club, that Facebook is their platform, right? And therefore, if you're now, let's assume, and Madeline, I'll kick it over to you now, if as you backed into Facebook as your platform, at any point Instagram was discussed too, was there any consideration of other platforms? Was TikTok going to come into it, or did you just feel as a team that it was simply, that was not going to be the place to go for this?
Yeah. So in our survey, one of the questions, people who took the survey were able to check off boxes of what platforms they wanted to engage with, or which ones they thought that they were going to engage with the most. So based off of that data, we found that Facebook and Instagram were the highest of those platforms. And we had included other things like YouTube and TikTok and X and other platforms. I think we even threw Reddit in there. But based off of the feedback that we were getting from about like 92 survey respondents, Facebook was the highest. And I think it really helps that Facebook and Instagram are kind of owned by the same entity. We were able to kind of choose which posts we wanted to be posted to both platforms at the same time.
Gotcha. And so you were inside the Facebook and the Meta, that ecosystem. And as a result of that, you could exchange information back and forth easily, and you can cross post and things like that. So here's a question that I had. Following the race, and this applies to those both working remotely and working on site, how wide was the gap of your pre-race perception and your post-race perception? Like the race that you thought you were going to see versus the race that you saw, what did you learn about that?
Yeah, I think before the race, I really didn't have a good sense of the community and the attitude behind it. I think that coming in, I just thought it was, like a little bigger triathlon. But I feel like as I was actually on site, I saw people having fun, people kind of celebrating like as they conquered a course. I think that community was really cool to see. I haven't really seen that before in any, not in the same way, in any like sports or anything I've previously seen. Just people willing to help each other out, and also people willing to, admit their mistakes and learn and grow from them throughout the course. People were really willing to be interviewed on a course as well, which was really cool. I think that adventure racing attracts a lot of different people who just want to have fun and get outside and improve their like health and stamina and strategy. So I think that was really cool to see, but there was definitely like kind of a big gulf in terms of how I perceived the attitude of adventure racers to be and what it actually was.
So if I understand correctly, and because adventure racing is such a niche sport, you thought, okay, people are running around, they're on their feet, there's a course. And so you thought it was more akin towards other endurance events, right? Whether it be a 10K, a 5K, a triathlon. And then and some of the words you used there, you said that you thought it was really cool. That they would help each other admit mistakes, and they were open. And I kind of added the word fun in my head. They clearly had a good time. Madeline, what do you think?
So my first exposure to adventure racing was over the summer watching Arthur the King film, the Mark Wahlberg film. And so when I watched that, and then when I was in this class and learned that our client was going to be an organizer of adventure racing, my sense of the race and how the race was going to happen was on this like larger scale, like how the movie depicts it abroad. And the movie also depicts like all the teams being really like cutthroat and like competitive and like wanting to like bring each other down. And which that is not the case. Like we saw in the post-race content that Veronica and Claire got, that the teams are all very supportive, and they're all like high-fiving each other and like talking about making friends along the way, like running into each other on the trail. But in terms of like capturing the media, so I was expecting like to be like some of the media would be on the trail, like on the side, like this big giant like shot of somebody riding their bike across this hill and doing this big jump. But that wasn't the case. Like since the race is non-linear, Veronica and Claire and Professor McCary were kind of limited to the transition areas to get content. So just that was how my pre-race and post-race perception changed.
So when it comes to communicating with the races to the public, what should race directors be emphasizing about the experience? Because a lot of the public might think it's like Arthur the King. How do they balance that? How do they accurately portray the sport to the public, strategically communicate it, but realize that there's a cultural product that's pretty popular that runs contrary to what the sport is really like? What should race directors do about that?
I think that emphasizing like the teamwork and community aspect is really important. So not just posting on the website, posting on social media, like we have this upcoming race, but also posting a lot of pictures and videos so that people can really get a feel for what it's like. We created a lot of different videos after the race, and also we, like leading up to the race, have a lot of fun graphics, but then during the race we focused on trying to get pictures of these teams working together and smiling and laughing and having a good time. And I think that that's super important to kind of make sure that people are getting the right idea of what they're getting into.
Veronica.
Yeah, going off what Francis said, I think one of the most important things for race directors to capture is the positive attitude that happens during the race. Because as someone who was coming into covering an adventure race with no past experience, I expected people to be so tired, not wanting to talk to me or Claire or Professor McCary, and just be, I'm racing, I'm on my way, like, don't bother me. And that is a complete opposite of what we got. People were so passionate and so excited about participating in a race. And even after 24 hours of racing at the finish line, they were all so happy. And of course, they were tired, but they still kept that positive attitude. So I think capturing this feeling for the audiences, especially the ones who have not participated in an adventure race before, is really important.
It's interesting how and we'll talk a bit about the in-race experience for those that were on site, but the idea that 24 hours later, like the race had started, a full day went by, and the next morning people are still awake and moving, had not slept. That kind of blows a lot of people's minds that to stay awake for that long. If you do a 5-day race, you could be awake for, that's 120 hours. You could be awake for 110 of those hours, which is like that race, but even bigger. So interesting pickup there. Quinn, go ahead.
I, going into this course, kind of had this perception that a lot of the racers that were participating in adventure racing were probably not working full time, that they didn't have other extracurriculars, or be it going to a 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And after doing the qualitative interviews, I realized that all of these people, including Mike Garrison of USARA, for instance, they have huge jobs, yet they're still able to participate in these 24-hour races on the weekends, maybe taking Monday off, or they're participating in 5 days of an adventure race, but then they're still able to go back to work that next week. And I think that really speaks to the culture of the adventure racing community, just in terms of being able to still have this full-time job, but then also be committed to being able to race. I think that was something that I didn't really realize, and thought that it was similar to maybe someone that's this super athlete that's constantly training for a triathlon that they have upcoming in a few months. So I think that that's probably something that people that are viewing the race for the first time might not understand, that these people are just regular people that have a love for adventure racing, and they like to get out there on the weekends, and they're going to do it as much as they can, but they also have a life and a family and a job outside of this adventure racing.
And that's a great point, by the way. That's a very, very strong that you brought up there, the idea that very often people hear about adventure racing, they will read something about it, they'll see some video, and they'll think, I could never do that, right? And so the bar that they have to jump over to participate is so high. And what you're saying through your experience was you realized that people who are far more run-of-the-mill, day-to-day workers, they can still do that. And I think and for the race directors out there who are listening, I think promoting the sport really points on the idea that this is accessible to a lot more people. Right. We talk a lot about the barriers to entry, like what prevents somebody from choosing to do a race. And there's various barriers. They're economic, there's equipment that's involved, there's a time commitment. But one thing that should not be a barrier is personal ability. Right. And very often on the show, we'll have people on who they do their first race and they just get smashed. They disintegrate. They have a terrible time, but they come back because there's something there for them, which is a lead into my next question. But I want to hear from Ruby first. Go ahead, Ruby.
Kind of tying off of what you were saying about barriers, another thing I think I realized, and everyone else as well, was that really anyone can be a part of the sport. I think from an initial impression of it, it's really intimidating to hear about a weekend-long, really physically demanding event. And I mean, personally, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I could never do this. This sounds crazy. But I think as we interviewed people during our research phase, I really heard from everyone. And then everyone else who had interviewed people kind of were saying the same thing, that everyone was emphasizing that it really shouldn't be intimidating. You don't need to be this pro athlete. You don't need to be the best athlete, in the group. It's really just about teamwork, essentially. And it is physically demanding, that's just a part of the sport, but that shouldn't be a reason that someone is maybe scared to try it or scared to get involved in the community, because really everyone we talked to was really emphasizing that when they tell people who maybe aren't involved in the sport about it, they really want to emphasize that you can do it. If you set your mind to it, you can totally be a part of it as well.
It sounds like that was a surprising takeaway for many of you. The idea that this wasn't necessarily like a super duper aggro type A alpha sport, that there were a wide variety of people who were involved in that. So here's my question. So based upon that, so recognizing that adventure racing takes a lot, what does the racer, what do they get in exchange for that? Right. So after they do a race, they sign up, they go through the training, they go to the race, they go through the effort of it. When they're all said and done, we return to something because it gives us something internally that we enjoy. What do you think the racers who are satisfied left the race with emotionally?
I think through the qualitative interviews, and then especially in my interview with Mike Garrison, hearing him speak about how the sport is really addicting and that it's so physically demanding, and hearing people's experiences in the race of wanting to quit and wanting to be done, and it might be storming outside and they're still having to 18 hours left of the night or whatever it may be, people were still going at it. And this physical demanding aspect of it, but then also this aspect of the teamwork and the working together to make this happen. I think that that's a part of adventure racing that I didn't really understand before then, and didn't understand why someone would want to be in the wilderness for that long with not really any idea of where they're going to find these different checkpoints on the treasure hunt, and they just have a map with them and a compass. So I think that this being able to use your brain while you're outdoors, but then also being able to use your body physically. And then in every single one of the qualitative interviews that they were saying, yes, it's addicting. Yes, it sucks in the moment. Yes, you want to quit. Yes, you want to be done. You want to be in bed. But then to have that feeling be done, and then also have that feeling be done with a group of people that you really love and care about, I think that is a very special aspect of the sport, and something that the entire class has definitely taken away.
Great answer, Quinn. Thank you. Veronica.
Yeah, in addition to what Quinn was elaborating on with like type 2 fun, some of the things that we also learned in our interviews was how people are challenging themselves. So it's the sense of accomplishment that they experience after completing a race is definitely something that makes them come back. And another interesting point is that in the world of ever-present technology, like notifications, emails, everything coming to you all at once every day of the week, racers have a unique opportunity to take a step away from all of that and be out in nature, racing, making friends, socializing, but also like seeing amazing views, doing something athletic, and they don't have to be worried about all of the digital world coming at them 24/7. So I think it's also part of the reason why people keep racing, and that's what they're trying. That isolation from social media and digital world also drives them and makes them come back.
So for the bigger races, the 5-day events, they require you to carry your phone for emergency purposes. But what they will do is they'll make you power it down, and they'll seal it in a bag, and then they'll sign the bag. And when the race is over, you have to show that the bag has been unopened, right? So you're not using the phone for advantage. I've spoken to so many racers that when they turn that phone off for those 5 days and it goes in the bag, they feel like so free. Like there's no pinging, there's nothing coming to them. And a big part of adventure racing is this too, and you may have picked up on this, is for all the variety of things that you're talking about here. One thing that people love about adventure racing is that their world becomes incredibly small in a delightful way. It's them, it's their teammates, it's a set of maps, and it's a period of time, and they become a self-sustaining unit that goes through. On top of that, a race that you experienced is that for the purpose of those 24 hours, Michelle and Liz, they created a self-sustaining community that came together, had a common experience, and then went home. And that experience gets exponentially bigger the longer a race gets. For example, in East Africa, they had the World Championships. There were like over 100 teams that raced for like 9 days. I mean, it was just the big, massive, great race. And so you're getting a sense of that. Now, Claire, you did have your hand up, but you took it down. Do you want to add something to it?
Yes, just adding super quickly. I think Madeline touched on this earlier about the nonlinear aspect of the course. I think it was really cool to see the racers have a sense of accomplishment for actually like conquering a course, like forging a probably brand new strategy and just going into the forest and navigating your way out of it successfully, and especially braving the elements. I know that there was a lot of wind on that lake that day, and everyone was paddling and saying it was like whitewater rafting almost. It was really cool just to see people literally be in the wild and conquer that. It was fun to see.
So based upon what you saw and what racers take away from it and their enjoyment, how can race directors communicate that to the public in an effective way to get people interested in coming and trying out a race?
The biggest thing that I have realized while I've just looked at different adventure racing organizations, social media pages, or their websites or their newsletters, and really just analyzing what they have, and then also from our quantitative survey results and looking at what content adventure racers really want to see, it's the video footage. That is something that really pulls you right in. I think that the video footage that racing directors will put up after a race, whether that be short reels, whether that be a video with a ton of photos, I think that having that media from the race really brings it to life instead of just saying, this is where this race is going to be, this is what happens, this is when you should be here. Showing people have fun, and then also having those post-race interviews to get a sense that these people are exhausted, yet they still had a great time and can still crack jokes, I think is really, really important to the sport to especially bring it to a younger generation.
Great piece of feedback. Huge, because race directors really struggle because they have these great events, but translating the event, which people are very, very satisfied with, into the general public for the purpose of capturing customers is really hard to do because it's a hard sport to explain. Everybody else want to add anything on top of that?
Yeah, I think it's a sport that lends itself really well to storytelling. I think if you get a few teams in and like over the course of the race, like keep interviewing them, keep taking pictures of them, and then put it all together into one story at the end. I mean, they just did an amazing thing. Like that's a story in of itself, and everyone has different backgrounds and motivations for doing this. I think you can get some really dynamic and interesting content if you kind of like focus on individual racers and team stories.
Shifting from the racing experience, what you saw on the way in and what you learned, one puzzle that race directors are always kind of working on is how they could accurately, in real time, report on the race during the event itself for the people at home, the dot watchers, family members, fans of the sport. For those of you who are on site and those of you who work remotely and had an understanding of it, how did that go? Was it easier? Did they do a good job reporting on it? What could they have done better? What did you learn? And what would you tell race directors that during a race you should be doing these things?
I think it is a great question. And the idea that people like our spectators want to see and keep track of their teams, just in general, what's going on with the race has been a fundamental aspect of our campaign. That's what we were trying to get at. So I'm glad you asked this question. First of all, it's very, very important to keep people updated with the dot watching tool. Even though, yes, they have access to it, sometimes it might be hard to understand what is actually going on unless you're on site. So what we did throughout the race, it was Professor McCary and Michelle. They recorded a series of updates. So we had the first update in the morning, then some throughout the day, and then later at night, where she gave context to what was going on the dot watcher. So I think that's definitely have been crucial to have out there for people to understand and not just see dots walking around the course, right. Especially because our spectators, they have not necessarily seen the course itself. Right. Which leads to my next point is Claire did this great post where she shared the race materials on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of the race. So of course it was after the racers themselves got the maps, made their strategy, and they were off. For us to engage the audience, we needed that for them to understand what is going on and what is actually in front of the racers. So sharing those maps and sharing those rules of the race was very, very beneficial.
Most common dynamic that people ask for during a race is that they want to say, where are the maps? Where is the tracking? And then context is important. And I think, too, for the race that you covered, the fact that there was so much choice involved, it was hard to understand the map when you were watching it, right? Because there were so many different directions. Those updates are very strong. I also recommend to race directors, when I discuss media with them, is that they should pre-publish their update times, right? Come back at 10 o'clock, come back at 12 o'clock, come back at 2 o'clock, and have those updates. So people who aren't watching the dots the entire day, they'll know that they can go on at a certain time and get an update on the race. Jared, please.
Yeah, I wonder if you folks could talk about how when you were looking at the tracking, you saw that there's these teams going in all different directions. And I think you folks learned that with the tracking, there are ways in which you can tell the audience what to focus on, right? to build up maybe some drama. And I think you figured out that the way in which you use some tools, video, you also had the leadership of Michelle to help you figure out where the story was in the tracking. Could you talk about that? Because that's important. It's all happening simultaneously. We can all see the live coverage. We might be focusing on just our family members or our friends, but there's ways in which you folks found the story in the tracking. Could you talk about that?
So I just want to make it known that I was not at the race, however, was following along on the Facebook page. And I remember a post on Sunday morning around like 7:30 a.m., I want to say maybe 8 a.m., where basically there was this time lapse of the dot watching and what was going on in that moment of this adrenaline. Like we're about to see the racers come in about 2 hours. Who's going to come in first? And I remember particularly, and we spoke about this in class as well, as there were two dots that were kind of following each other, kept overlapping on the course, but then, I don't know, they would go in different directions and then come back together. And I think that's a story that needs to be told through these dot watching. Of course, I don't think family members and spectators are hanging around on the dot watching all day. They might check in and make sure their family members are okay. But at the end of the day, no one has 24 hours in to just be watching these dots. So I think having those little time lapses and being able to share a story about these are two teams that keep seeing each other on the course and they're passing each other. We don't know who's going to make it through the finish line first was really important. And I think that a lot of race directors should use that tactic to be able to show that this is a quick little snippet of what we're seeing on the course right now. We're 2 hours from the finish line.
So they should do like a micro breakdown of certain dots in the course of the race that might be having competitive could be competing back and forth, right? Here we are now, it's now 10 o'clock in the morning. Here's dot A, here's dot B. This is what we're seeing out there. Keep in mind, the dots sometimes, the satellites aren't perfect, but this is what we think is happening during the race. Veronica.
Yeah, definitely. The two dots that were following each other was very interesting. And we necessarily, like me and Claire, would not have noticed it because it's our first adventure race. But having someone as experienced as Michelle point that out and be like, oh, this is an interesting story. Like, I wonder what's going on. And we both are like, oh, if she's wondering what's going on, our audience would too. And I think it's a good way to engage people. From more of a technical perspective, the dot watching tool that we were using had a very great rewind function. So even if at the point when the race directors are making content or you're just thinking of doing something, you can always rewind to the moment when that happened. And you can also technically fix the speed at what is happening. So to get that time lapse effect, we sped it up and we also rewinded it a little bit to engage people.
So here's a question I always like to ask when we talk about what people learn from the sport. So the adventure racing community is fascinating to the dark zone, and our reporting on the sport is often about the ethic of personal growth and achievement that permeates AR. As a community, we compete with vigor and want to place well, but also appears to be more than that. How did your brush with AR change your attitude towards your own growth and capacity? What did you learn about yourself and your own growth as a result of being involved in the sport?
I think being on site, me and Veronica had a very limited time to have ideas for content, create it, and then get it published. And so working in a very limited time frame, I think it really taught me, and I'm sure Veronica could elaborate on this as well, but it really taught me to be creative within a very narrow time frame. But also because that might be stressful, it's also it was also fun to have fun and have it be a fun thing that we're doing and not have the deadlines be too stressful on us, because it was time sensitive, but it was also just so fun to organically create content and have that be published in real time. I think it was definitely less stressful than I anticipated, and it's because of that community and culture that I felt that way.
Gotcha. So the adrenaline, the energy was a great thing to sort of experience while you were there. Veronica.
Yeah, to build off what Claire was saying, definitely we had a lot of opportunities to be creative in a short period of time. And my high level takeaway is that you can really do anything. We just figured out little details and sentiment about the sport in such a short period of time, covered a 24-hour race, and got to engage with so many people in the community. And so far, based on the feedback, we did it successfully. And at moments when it was hard, for me personally, I'm not an early morning person, at all. So waking up extremely early to go and cover the race, it was very tough. But then when I would wake up in this very nice cabin that we were staying at, I was thinking like, oh my God, like we're up so early. But then I think of all of those racers, they probably have not slept at all. So just having that example of endurance and dedication really, really pushed me to my own limits and thinking that anything is possible, really.
If you want to get a big crash course on that, there's a race in Vermont at the end of June called Endless Mountains Adventure Race. I'm wearing the sweatshirt here. If you are free, you could spend 5 days as a volunteer. Do it for 5 days or 3 days or 2 days, and they feed you and you go around the course, and it's a fascinating thing. So yes, to your point, Veronica, you see that really, really up close. For those of you who are looking for something to do this summer, they'd love to have you. Madeline, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is probably an echo of what Veronica and Claire have already said, but it's just as these racers are also walking away with this sense of fulfillment and like, oh my gosh, I just conquered that. I think Veronica, Claire, and I were also walking away with this sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, like, oh my gosh, I just conquered covering a 24-hour race. I know I was very nervous when I stepped in remotely to start doing it. So I was like, how am I going to make sure I'm capturing correctly what Veronica and Claire are capturing? Like I'm not there. So I'm not experiencing the same feelings that they are being in that environment. So how am I going to make sure I'm conveying that correctly to the audience and doing their work and their media capturing justice? So I was very nervous about that, but then I did it, and I did it in a really short window, and it was just walking away with this sense of pride and like, oh my gosh, I just did that. Like, I'm really proud of myself. And I think it was really well received. We're starting to kind of evaluate our work, and there were a lot of shares and a lot of engagement. So it's just a really big sense of fulfillment.
Francis.
Yeah, so I didn't go to the race, so this isn't as much, I guess, about my experience at the race, but I guess something I learned throughout the whole experience was that everyone kind of has to start somewhere. And we all talked about how we didn't know that much about the sport and how we didn't think it was something we'd be willing to try out. But I kind of think about this piece of advice I've heard that's have a bias toward yes. So, you'll miss out on like a lot of really cool experiences if you're always thinking, oh, I could never do that. And seeing these racers complete the race and seeing their grit and determination was really inspiring. And I'm not saying that I'll be out there at the next race, but I do think that just seeing that this is this really cool opportunity that we got to learn about. And I think just being open-minded to new challenges and new experiences is so important. And that's something that I took away.
Yeah. And for those of you on site, you saw it up close. The finish line of an adventure race is a really powerful place to be, because there will always be people who come across that line. And it's the hardest thing that they've ever done in their entire lives. And they're stunned that they actually did it. Like, they're blown away. Like, I don't believe I just was awake for 24 hours or 48 or even 6 hours or 8 hours. I did that. And you got a little taste of that through your experience, both remotely and on site. The fact that one thing adventure racing does, it teaches people about their personal capacity, right? And the fact that they can be more than that. And to the point you made there, like, start with yes. I will tell you that I know many, many people, adventure racers, but also like in life, that they started things, they really weren't qualified or prepared to do it. And they just figured it out along the way. They did something, made a mistake, fixed it, kept doing it, and nothing was fatal. And they just had to figure it out. And I think you got a taste of that through adventure racing. Clearly, the decisions had to be made in the context of the race and in preparing for the event, and even the stuff that you did after the race. You had to make some creative decisions about a sport that you really didn't know super well, that you were building your understanding of in a really dynamic environment. So from a communications perspective, walk me through the decisions that you made about the things you chose to put out there to represent the race and what options you had or didn't have to do so.
Yeah, so kind of going off of that. So Quinn, Francis and I made a lot of content leading up to the race. So that was kind of a combination of us working together to think about what do people actually care about? What is media that they'll engage with? And one of them was centered around the idea that no one knows the course until a few hours before the start of the race and kind of the anticipation leading up to that. So that was kind of fun to play off of. Like Professor McCary said, we went through a bunch of different drafts of Canva edits, kind of teasing the release of the course, which might seem like just, making a graphic and putting it up on Facebook, but it was deeper than that just because this is such an anticipated moment for everyone involved. They don't know how to plan their route. They don't know the route. So kind of something fun that we got to play around with was just the idea that everyone's kind of in the same boat. No matter how many races you've done, you don't know what's ahead of you. So kind of building anticipation up on that, but through the social media platform. We use Facebook for this. So that was really fun to do.
So clearly there was a lot of real world knowledge that you had about trends and the technology to be used combined with the high stakes level of releasing the course and then making that accessible to the larger public, right? Having to make those decisions in the moment very often, knowing that you did some practice forward with templates, but when it's going on, things are moving along, you got to move relatively quickly.
Yeah, when we came to the race, we had certain pieces of content that we definitely wanted to make. Like we had the race schedule and we knew, we're going to take pictures, we're going to do videos. But I think Claire can speak to that too. We found a lot of little creative opportunities. Like there was this one racer whose wife got a funny video of him falling into the mud. I don't know if you ended up seeing, but it was on our Facebook story. But we did a subtle foreshadowing trend where you have the video going, but then in random places you insert a video of him like falling with a funny sound in the background. So it's definitely something that could not have been decided before. Like yesterday, we didn't know we were gonna get that funny video. And today we got it and we had to make a decision and come up with something because it's cool, it's engaging content, people will find it funny, but how are we going to present it to the public? So having an opportunity to make this funny, creative pieces of content that make it more personalized for the audience and keeping the audience in mind rather than just, we come in here, we do this coverage, take pictures, post, those are the winners, race has started. We try to make it as personal as possible to include the audience and make them feel like they are there.
Yeah, it's interesting too because you do fall into a trap during racing. I've done this myself. Is that there's like the echo chamber of the race itself, and something that appears really funny, interesting inside the race really doesn't translate well to outside the race. And I have seen some decisions in a bit dark, a bit more negative, that sometimes during races, racers are hurt, right? They're hypothermic, they're cold, they're not feeling well, they're injured sometimes. And in other races, not in this race, and not by Michelle and Liz, is that race directors and media teams in the moment thought they had really, really interesting content and put things out into the world that out of context was really rather alarming. And they had to pull that content down right away. And so to your point, and when you get tired and exhausted, it's kind of like your judgment goes down a little bit and you got to be careful and you got to talk. Like, how's this going to land out there? Because something is really funny in the moment, but in context, it's like, no, we had that this year at the national championships. We were down there doing some coverage and it was late in the race. And myself and Mary Foster, who was my partner, we were driving around with this van with a Starlink on it. It was a lot of fun. And someone made a joke at a late in the race transition area that was rather off color, that in the context of that moment was really, really, really funny and got a really good laugh from everybody who was there. But the minute you show that, and if I just showed it to you right now, you'd be kind of a little horrified. You'd be disturbed that someone actually found that funny. And so from a strategic perspective, communications, you have to be discerning on what you're going to put into the world and what you're not going to put into the world. And that's a big lesson. That's why it's good to have this is a really good idea, run it by somebody else. Be like, yeah, we're gonna hold on that. We'll see how that lands in a couple of hours. So that's a really good good thing that you brought up there. It's also not lost upon me, by the way, that I'm speaking to a class with 6 women, right, a full female class, who covered a race that was run by 2 women, Liz and Michelle Fauché, with a sport that in its origins is designed to be multi-gender. that when adventure racing began, if you wanted to to race in the premier division, you had to be a multi-gender team. And that is an ethic that has spiraled for decades through the race. And it's been a really huge, equity driver for the sport itself. And so I didn't want to let our conversation end today without giving all of you the chance to comment on that, as an all-female communications team, working with an all-female race leadership team with a sport that is by design multi-gender. Any thoughts, any observations as you learn from this experience?
Yeah. So one of the things, at least in terms of media and capturing stories that we wanted to tell, we all very early on recognized that we were an all-female team working for an all-female led organization who puts on this annual all-female race, the Buff Betty. And so while we weren't focusing on the Buff Betty, we did want to highlight that female inclusion in athletics was really important to this organization and to the sport and to this race. And so part of that was making sure that we were, Veronica and Claire were capturing media about some of the women teams. So Women of AR, that was the team. We did I worked on the feature video that got posted on Facebook, I believe last Friday. So that was definitely on the back of all of our minds. It was a very conscious thought and a very conscious thread that we wanted to pull through as we were starting to cover the race and create media for our campaign.
I think something additionally is that there are co-ed teams. It's not just a female team and a male team. It's not something that you typically see in traditional sports teams. To be able to have that working together in a co-gender team, that was something that I was not aware of before going into this course. I wasn't really familiar with adventure racing before the course, but seeing that people can be on co-ed teams, I think was really enlightening and honestly heartwarming to see.
Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Dark Zone Adventure Racing podcast. Thank you to the students for coming on to the show and for the work they did for Adventure Addicts. Thank you to Jared for making the episode happen. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear on the Dark Zone, feel free to head to your platform of choice and click, and subscribe. And remember, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking.